Some of you guys are Let's Talk regulars. This is not a Let's Talk call. Our Let's Talk format are really about having conversations on topics that matter the most to executives, professionals, founders, and the like. Community of 7 is launching our microlearning series where we feature a leading subject matter expert to discuss topics that we feel are really important to succeeding in business, life, or starting a business. So what the heck is a microlearning? It's a training and development that focuses on offering bite-sized, small learning units with just the necessary amount of information to help learners achieve a goal. This is not a webinar where you passively listen to talking heads. We're gonna want you to participate once we do the breakout groups, and we're gonna wanna hear your feedback as well. We want you to immediately take 1, 2, 3 actions after we hang up. So it could be updating your profile. It could be writing a post, commenting on a popular thread within 24 hours. Yes, you have homework. And as we are community focused, we want you, this is your request, to connect with 1, 2, 3 new people on this call so that you actually hold each other accountable. You might ping each other or add each other on LinkedIn. As such, when we go into the breakout rooms, please turn on your videos for those who have their videos off. I know sometimes you don't have your hair and your makeup, or you might be in your PJs. That's okay. This is a no judgment zone here in our community. So today's topic is on how to stand out as a thought leader on LinkedIn. If you're a professional who wants to branch out as a thought leader in your industry, LinkedIn is an amazing place to gain visibility, demonstrate your credibility or expertise, and create valuable discussions within your industry community. So this microlearning features our special guest, Callie Schweitzer, the senior news editor at LinkedIn. Callie leads the editorial coverage of the marketing industry for the platform's 706 million, let me repeat that, 706 million global members. So before joining LinkedIn, she founded the Callie Company, which is an advisory firm that worked with Fortune 500 brands and top executives to increase reach, relevance, and revenue. She was a chief content officer at Ariana Huffington's Thrive Global, overseeing editorial and corporate content, advertising sales, and the Thrive Global podcast. She has held senior leadership positions working across editorial, audience, marketing, and revenue at Time Inc. and Time, Vox Media, and the Talking Points Memo. She has been widely, my daughter just burped. She has been widely recognized for her impact, including being named twice to Forbes 30 Under 30 Media list, referred to as a future of media by Business Insider, named it Adweek Future Publisher, and selected as one of Time's 140 best Twitter feed in the world. So Callie, so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And if you hear Frozen 2 in the background, it's because my husband is watching our niece in a performance.
Oh, I thought he was watching Frozen.
But I'll hope we can get there.
So Callie, we're so excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit more about you, about LinkedIn, your role, and what makes the LinkedIn platform so special.
Yeah, so I want to start by saying there's someone here, Mary Lou Song, who I owe my entire life to. I did a journalism program at Northwestern. It was called Medill Cherubs, and it was really like journalism boot camp. I mean, for nerds who love journalism, it was one of those like light at the end of the tunnel kind of things. But Mary Lou was my instructor. I think it was a program of like 60 of us, and Mary Lou is really responsible for teaching me the journalistic way. So I wanted to make sure I gave her a shout out because I wouldn't be where I am without her. So what do I do now? I hold a really interesting position in that I am a journalist at a tech platform, right? This is like such uncharted territory. And, you know, you heard my background. It's really traditionally in editorial at publishing platform, publishing houses, right? So Time or Vox Media. But this has been a really interesting job because I've always been interested in this intersection of community, audience, and content and where they come together. And so where better to talk about marketing than on the world's largest social professional network where there are a ton of marketers. So my job is really around 3 C's and a D. And I realize that's very buzzwordy, but I'm just going to go with it because it's the easiest way to explain what I do. Create content, cultivate different voices, curate different things that people are saying across the platform, and distribute. So it's my job to really feature the best voices out there on the platform and to cover what the marketing industry is thinking about.
Awesome. And so I know we kind of talked earlier about today, or was it yesterday, about LinkedIn and how this past year has been so life-changing for so many of us with coronavirus, everyone working from home. Kind of how have things shifted kind of like pre-pandemic and to kind of where we're at now?
Yeah, from what I've seen, and I'd be really interested if people want to leave comments in the chat, the platform has become much more vulnerable, much more personal, much more about the intersection of that personal and professional life. I think while many of us knew the two were completely enmeshed before, now it's just like they are so on top of each other, right? Morgan just burped, my husband right? Like all of these things, but it makes us so much more human. And I think what we've seen on LinkedIn is that so many more people are sharing that part of their lives. There was a viral story a few weeks ago about a woman who changed her headshot to be from her sort of corporate headshot to her with her hair just out of the shower and just like no makeup and being like, this is what I actually look like right now. And that's the kind of stuff that people are resonating with so much.
Yeah, and it's funny because actually we talked about this yesterday, and it's the fact that, you know, prior to this, I was at Fortune, and then I was also at the Association of National Advertisers, working with a lot of CMOs. And I remember just going through the whole, like, you know, speaker series at conferences, like, you know, you have all of these different big national conferences, and it was all about celebrity. It was about the CMOs and these C-suites. And I feel like there's kind of a movement, especially with LinkedIn, where it's really about authentic voices. And even when, you know, as I did programming for Community of 7 with our Let's Talk, I didn't really care about celebrity. It was about vulnerability. Like the best stories are people who are willing to share their pains, their frustrations, and their challenges. You don't want to hear about perfect people. It's like, this is not the time to be perfect right now with COVID.
Totally. I think that's absolutely right. And one of the things that I always get asked about is this my professional resume? Do I need to have, 800 words of thought leadership? And I say, no, right? People ask me, what should I post? And one of the big things that I've come away with in my time there is that LinkedIn is a platform of generosity. And when I think about it as a social platform that is about us over me. And you think about like posting the highlights. I mean, I think we all know that person or a lot of those people where every day you sign on and it's about the amazing award they won or the article or the this or the that. And it's like, oh, right? You're so tired of that. But what resonates the most is the opposite of that, the generosity aspects. When people ask me, what should I be posting? I say, well, do you know anyone doing anything cool? Have you ever read a great article or seen something awesome? Do you have an open position? Do you know someone who is hiring for an open position? All of these kinds of things are not self-promotional, right? They don't feel like that kind of gross, braggy content. And that's something that I think a lot about because it's something people underestimate the value of on the platform. And so I think for anybody here who feels a little bit of that hesitancy of, oh, I don't want to brag, I don't know what to say, don't think of it that way. Think about how can you use your platform to increase the generosity and the spotlight on other people.
So one of the questions that Claudine had in the chat is that, are you seeing a difference in terms of generational difference where, seasoned people post more than, like the professional versus younger workers?
It's interesting. I don't have the exact analytics on that, but something that's really interesting is I once did a what we call a storyline around Gen Zs and our Gen Z, the brand generation. And it was so funny because I thought that I had featured several Gen Z voices in that storyline. Turns out I'm much farther away from Gen Z than I thought. And somebody sent me a direct message and said, "Hey, I'm Gen Z. Don't talk about us, talk with us," right? And I just said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that there were no Gen Z voices here. I thought that Gen Z," right? And just that disconnect. And I think that there absolutely is a ton of hunger and a ton of interest from Gen Z who are getting into or in the early years of the workplace and looking for that professional virtual water cooler. It's just interesting to see how different people use it. And I love in that case, he was saying to me, "Count me in."
Yeah. And I kind of find it interesting too, just like talking to my women executives, right? Who kind of feel like a little bit like, well, I don't want to be self-promotion. It's such a dirty word.
Yeah.
And it's such a barrier, right? Because what helped me, because I was the same way. I didn't really post on LinkedIn, and I only started probably in the past year or so, especially when I started my own business. But I remember, and Claudine is on the call. She used to be on my team when I was at Fortune and when I was at the ANA as well. We worked together. But we were at a conference, and this was her first conference that she held. And like, I was in sales before, and I was like, you have to reframe how you see things, right? You have to figure out what motivates you to provide content. And in the situation of going to a conference and networking, people feel icky, right? And I was like, this conference, pretend this is your home, and all of these hundreds and thousands of people are your guests. So your job is to make them feel at home, make them feel comfortable. And when you shift the paradigm, it makes it a lot easier for you to be your authentic self. So the way I saw things on LinkedIn, and like moving it from self-promotion more so to about, how can I help people? When I reframed it as, how can I help people who are going through some really difficult times, it informed what kind of content I created digitally. So, we record these videos and we put them online for people, because someone needs to hear these messages. Mm-hmm. And so when I kind of reframed it from less about selling and more so about how do I help as many people as possible, it made it so much easier for me to actually provide content, because it wasn't yucky selling. It was like helping people, right? So we have Maitri is calling from London. Hey, do you see a difference in the way the platform is used by people in the US versus Europe, Asia, and Africa?
Oh, this is a great question. I would say yes, in that the platform has rolled out in different parts of the world in different times. So there are certain places where, from an editorial perspective, our LinkedIn news team is newer. So we are 75 journalists in 15 different countries. And so we started in the US. And so that's something where when we publish franchises like Top Voices or Big Ideas, which we just put out about some of the predictions we have for 2021, those are some things that are rolling out to newer markets for the first time. And so I think in the US, the editorial team is the most established, just because of the longevity of it starting in the US. But otherwise, I think that we're really excited about what we're seeing across the rest of the platform.
Awesome. And Amanda, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thanks, Lan, for hosting. I always love being here. And Callie, welcome. It's so great to hear you. This is such a great opportunity. I don't know if this question is controversial or not, but I've been thinking about this a lot. I am consulting with clients, and I still flirt with full-time opportunities. And one thing that I would like to ask about LinkedIn is, and I don't know if this starts to really kind of step into the HR world, but I think we as seekers and people who are leaders and wanting to advance our careers, one of the things when you're pursuing a job, and especially on LinkedIn, there can be a lot of silence and ghosting.
Mm.
And it's a very important topic because we as leaders and seekers want to improve. And so I think there's some accountability that when you get ghosted by a job, we as people want to know why we didn't get the job. And I think that I just have always been wondering if there's something that LinkedIn could do about policing that, because it's kind of like you're the person who's hosting the party, and yet, like, we want to, these people are seeking us and we're coming to the party, but when we don't get these jobs, I think we as human beings want to know and we want to improve. So I think it really would be amazing for us to get feedback. It's like when you get a C on your paper, your teacher writes in the side why you didn't get, an A. And so I think that there's something as humans about if there's a way to find out more about why we didn't get the job. If you go 4 rounds and you don't get it, you really want to know why.
Yeah.
That's my question. Sorry, it was a little long to set it up.
Wonderful. I so appreciate that. I took a note and I'm going to absolutely pass it on to our product team here on the learning side. That is something that I think is so, I know exactly what you mean, right? Whether it's around job seeking or dating or any form of rejection.
It's no different. Yeah, exactly.
Why? Tell me why, right?
Yeah, like when someone breaks up with you, you want to know why.
Well, my favorite thing with dating before I met my husband was meeting a guy where I decided I didn't like him, but he should like me, right? So like similarly with the job thing, it's like, well, I didn't want that job, but so I hear you completely. And I think that is something that I imagine so many people share. And I would say that on my editorial team, I have a colleague named Andrew Seaman who covers the job seekers beat. And he actually has done a ton around ghosting. I don't think he's dived in specifically to the LinkedIn product, but I would definitely am happy to follow up with a link to his stuff or something, because I know he tackles a lot of this. And I mean, yes, I think that is so top of mind. And in terms of the product, I can't speak to any of like the roadmap out, editorially. I sit in.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Callie.
You are so great.
And I'm happy to follow up about it later, but I just thought, I know I'm feeling it. And I think that might reflect how a lot of job seekers are feeling. Cause again, we all want to improve and we all want to take what you don't have and fill it in with skills or whatever.
And hearing more about people getting ghosted, like since COVID as well, like, just from friends, people are kind of in HR that it's becoming common practice. And I don't know if it's just the volume of people being let go and people are just overwhelmed, but it is.
It could be. Yeah, it could be something as simple as that. If just, everyone wants to go home at 7 o'clock. I mean, I know, Allie, you knew the life at Viacom, it's like we all wanted to just go home at 7, and there's still like how many still emails that you can return, and and sometimes they fall below the line and then it's lost and you forget, and it's not that you're a bad person, it's just that there's just bandwidth. So anyway, I'm happy to talk later. I didn't mean to take up time. Sorry.
I mean, one of the things to maybe even kind of consider, and not in the job interview space, but I know when I was doing sales, one of the things you're taught is to not take things personal. So especially when it comes to, you're going to be inviting people to connect with you, and some of them won't add you, right? But if you want to kind of build your network, you're going to ask for people who might be CEOs or C-suite or kind of folks who might not want to connect, right? You can't take it personal because one of the things I used to always tell to my sales team was that when you are in sales, you have to be a gigolo. It's a numbers game, right? And the things with gigolos, they will ask 20 women until that one woman says yes, right? Or it could be a male, the reverse sex, right? But it's about the number games. And if you took every rejection personally on LinkedIn, you probably wouldn't ask anyone to connect like a stranger, right? So just one of the things to kind of consider. And kind of talking about Allie earlier, your former coworker at Viacom and also boss host.
Can I jump in and say one thing? First of all,
sure.
Amanda, thank you so much for sharing that. I so appreciated the vulnerability. I hear it completely. I know exactly how you feel. I took a note so we can connect, but 100% hear you and thank you. On the HR front, I think something that's really interesting to me in covering brands and marketing is that the line between employer brand and consumer brand has completely been erased, right? Think about this last year, everything that we have gone through, massive unemployment, racial reckoning, civil unrest. I mean, everything that's been happening, this election. Your brand to your customers is the same as your brand internally. And I think we've all had that experience where it's with customer service or whether it's with hiring or something where you're like, wow, that experience was awesome. That every single touch point was exactly how I would love to think about this brand. That's the exact kind of thing that you're mentioning, right? Like it's impressions. They are impressing on you every single time there's communication. And I think it's really important. You know, I'm sure there are a ton of people on this Zoom who are in positions of hiring or something and thinking about that workflow, right? That communications flow. It's so important nowadays. So thank you for saying that.
Yes. And Allie, do you want to unmute and ask your question about social selling?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, Amanda. Always good to see you from Viacom. Hi, Callie. Good to see you. So my question is kind of taking it back a little bit. I'd love to get kind of your thoughts on both thought leadership and social selling strategy. I always put this data point in my decks, which is that 61% of C-suite execs note that thought leadership directly led them to give business to a company. And I believe that's from like a LinkedIn Edelman study at some point. How do you think about that? How does a team think about that in this bigger picture also of the fact that authenticity and kind of who you are and what is your personal, like, how does that play out for you?
Yeah. So it's a great question. We mentioned networking earlier, and networking is a dirty word, right? It sounds transactional. And I think when we say thought leadership, it's similarly loaded. It has this sort of grossness to it where we think it's braggy and we think it looks like one thing, which is like, I wrote an 800-word article that is approved by my legal, corporate comms, marketing, right? It's approved by everybody. And by the time it comes out, it's like pretty much like the blankest, vanilla thing in the world. And you're like, this isn't interesting. To me, thought leadership is the authentic self you bring to the platform or to any of your platforms every day. And what I would say is that I think that I love that Lan asked earlier, how many of you are lurkers? Because I think you can build your entire thought leadership platform or strategy off of commenting. 100%. And that's something that when you think about it, that's like actually really doable in terms of like, do you have time to leave a comment per day? Yeah, you do, right? And maybe that starts with something that's kind of generic, like the congrats or thanks for sharing or something like that. But you'll build up your confidence to adding something to a conversation. And that's what I really think about is like, when I think about my reporting, it's like, I want to take the best journalism that's out there and figure out how we can have a great conversation about it on LinkedIn. So just as you would join a conversation in Slack or at a networking event or at a conference or something, how are you thinking about contributing to the conversation? Because your role in the conversation is your thought leadership. And we need to like rebrand thought leadership. I think there's a lot of marketers on here. So let's huddle after, because I agree. It's like, it's such a gross word, and we don't think of it as expansive as it can be.
I love that idea about give and take. And I think we had a conversation about this yesterday as well, that you need to first be able to kind of provide, like by posting to comments and all this other stuff, and not just posting content. Because I see people who post content and there's no interaction, and they're like, well, why isn't there any interaction? The question I always ask is, are you interacting with other people? Are you liking other people's comments? Because it's like it's in the real world, right? You tend to gravitate towards people where, you know, you have a connection with, and it's about helping each other. I think about my community in my neighborhood in Dobbs Ferry, and it's like, you know, sometimes I'll drop off my daughter to my friends. Sometimes she'll do the same. You need to borrow a cup of sugar. It's the same thing. It's about give and take. So, you know, Callie, is that kind of like any other kind of best practices, rules of the road for that?
So I love that, because you're absolutely right. It is the reciprocity. And I think people often ask me, how often should I be sharing something about myself versus the work that I'm doing versus somebody else's thing? And for me, it's really about, like, when people ask me for an exact number, there isn't an exact number, right? But I think that, to your point, Lan, showing up in different places in different ways makes it much easier to become comfortable posting yourself. And I think that there is a tremendous value to thinking about your content as something that should live for 72 hours to 7 days. That's extremely different than the way you would approach a tweet or an Instagram story or something like that. And I think that that's something that's hugely important. When I'm posting, I'm always thinking, 7 days from now, could this conversation still be going on? And if it is, that's fantastic, because I know it's something that really struck a chord with people.
Yeah. And I have a question from Malur Narayan. Question for Callie: is there a difference in effectiveness of posts, articles, videos, images, etc.?
So great question. I love this because I'm all about experimentation here. One of my favorite things is polls. I will say, I think they're like really fun, and I've found that engagement is super high on them. I think that, as with any and all platforms, the ability to test new things, like when something's new, try it, right? Because it's like the new, cool, exciting thing. So I would say, we definitely see a ton of engagement with video and with photos, but like I personally try to do all sorts of different things, whether it's sharing an article or just sharing a text post. So I think test it out and what feels best for you. But I would say, in general, I think experimenting is always the way to improve your overall presence.
Awesome. And Claudine, I know you have a question about pushback on certain posts. Do you want to unmute? I know I've been seeing that a lot too, especially with Black Lives Matter and all of these things. They're like, oh, well, that should be on Facebook. And I hate saying those, but you see that pretty often. And people are kind of afraid to post content because they're like, well, I don't want to offend anyone. Claudine, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Oh yeah, really that was precisely it, because you know that there's the Facebook, IG, Twitter, they each have their specific focus and et cetera. And people think LinkedIn, it's professional, politics, the personal has no place there. And then there's others who say politics is personal. And I can't distinguish or remove myself from that. So I'm just curious, is there a position where that one should, what these things I should not post on this platform? Just your thoughts.
Claudine, I hear you. I so hear you, because I think you're absolutely right. In this past year, the evolution of what people are comfortable talking about on the platform. I see people posting pictures of their kids, and that's something I hadn't seen before this past year, right? So it's like that openness and that vulnerability that then becomes something where, yeah, you're absolutely right. Some people are not going to like it. Some people are going to love it. So what I would say in that sense is do what feels right for you. I'm not into the making rules kind of thing, just because I don't think, to me, it's about what do you want to be conveying about yourself on the platform? I think a lot about this with brands because of the idea that, like, this past year covering politics, brands were politics, right? Sports was politics. Everything at the center of culture is like now in this place that's completely glued together. And so I would say I hear you. I think that that's really ultimately what's right for you. And I would say, like, if you are following or connected to those people where it's just like, you know what, I'm done with that, just disconnect, right? Like, just make that choice for yourself.
I was asked by a friend who was giving advice to recent grads on how to engage on LinkedIn. And I found myself being very respectable and saying, don't do this. And, you know, as we say, the respectability politics. And I'm thinking, am I looking at it from this Gen Xer perspective versus, Gen Zs and millennials who are saying, I'm showing up and I'm being my authentic self. And if you as a brand, you as an employer, you choose not to hire me because I am going to post politics and things that are personal and political and professional to me, I don't want to work for you. And so I had to kind of step back and say, wait a minute, what kind of advice am I giving here and tips am I offering? Because, I'm thinking through my lens as a Gen Xer versus, this a younger, and that's where my question was coming from. Like, do we see differences in terms of how they're using the platform versus, a more seasoned professional?
Yes, absolutely. That makes total sense. Thank you for that context. It's so funny because similarly, I'll oftentimes be like, don't post a picture of yourself on Instagram drinking out of a red Solo cup because you're clearly, drinking from a keg or whatever. And then I'm like, I don't know, maybe that's like okay now, right? With Gen Z, maybe it's fine. But I think, yes, I think there is, I think there's sort of two sides to it. There's like the people who will always treat it as like, this is my professional platform. I must always be on the professional formal side. And then I think there are people, and I've definitely become one of them, where it's just, I treat it much more casually and I'm much more, familial and friendly with people than I think I would have used to think about the platform. And that's my personality coming through. So I think, yes, and it's like, it's evolving in that, to your point, the generations are modeling different behavior to each other.
So I'm going to post some of the comments in the chat. Dr. Sam Jennings saw a prior comment about antagonistic politics on LinkedIn. Similarly, people are feeling free to share quite caustic comments and discussions that probably wouldn't be shared in person. Oftentimes the discussions would otherwise be productive, not just a love fest of agreement. And then I got an anonymous one. Should I feel guilty about rejecting a connection request if that person does not give a reason why they were asking to link?
I have so many thoughts on this. On the and you should raise your hand right now. I'll turn onto gallery view if you accepted way too many people in the beginning, and now all of these people come up on your feed, and you're like, who are these people?
Okay, so go into what do you call it? Gallery mode. Raise your hand if you think you have too many people now just asking questions or selling to you.
Me too. And the idea of going through and like disconnecting is actually extremely stressful. But yeah, all the time I'll get a note from someone and it's like, hey, I saw you're connected to so-and-so. And I'm like, I truly have no idea who that is. So two thoughts in terms of the challenges around speech and conversation. Absolutely report what you see. I know we have a team working overtime to keep on top of this. I know LinkedIn is the most trusted network in terms of everything that's happening around misinformation and hate speech, but I would say 100% report. And if there's ever something that I can personally be helpful with, please feel free to reach out to me. On the accepting people thing, it is not mean to reject a request. What I would say is, and this has been game changing for me, I also think this is like hugely helpful in the optics of being a thought leader. You can change your profile so that the default goes from connect to follow. And I think that is hugely valuable because if you think about it, and people who are like really familiar on the product side, it's like, think about how many clicks it takes to get to follow. It actually takes 3 clicks, whereas or to get to connect, whereas going to follow, it's like, yeah, I'll just follow that person. It takes a lot of energy to connect with someone if you're going to go that far. I would also say there's a way to turn on a requirement so that your email is required in order for someone to request a connection with you. Now, of course, someone's going to guess that your email is, first name dot last name at company. But again, that's a real next step in the effort. So I would say going from connect to follow, I think is a great first step. If you're getting a ton of stuff that's just driving you nuts, I would say turn on the requirement for the email. And the default setting to go from connect to follow, that's going to be in your account. And then it's going to be I'm thinking of the little picture of you, and then settings, and then it'll say, I think, who can connect with you, or yes, it's definitely, no, it's not on your profile. It's in the part where you would do settings and my account. Lan, we can also send around, I can send around a link actually right now if that's helpful.
Yeah, and you could also send it to me after every meeting. I always have recaps in the videos, probably within 24 hours.
Perfect.
Because everything's actionable, right? So anything you want to share to the group, you can just send it to me and I'll make sure everyone gets it.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I want to make sure we answer Trisha's email, because I think it's important for those who, and not a lot of us have our own business pages, but what can businesses do, or solopreneurs or entrepreneurs do to kind of get more followers to their company pages? Because I know I had that issue in the beginning too, where I had a really big connection following me, but my business didn't. And then that changed or switched at some point. But how do businesses get more followers?
So I focus on the people aspect of this. So I'm not focused on company pages, but what I would say is think about what you value from a company, and it's when they're a curator. I interviewed the CEO of Ben & Jerry's, and I asked him, are you a media company? Because when I go to your Twitter feed, I can get caught up on the last 24 hours of news. And I think that's something that's really interesting. Now, Ben & Jerry's is a very specific brand. It has a very specific way, but I think that to the point about thought leadership, make your company page something that people want to follow, because it's going to be providing interesting news and interesting articles and things to you. There was also a question someone had earlier about people just saying somebody posting something and then saying thoughts ? I am hugely into adding context and really making sure you're putting value out there. I think that, sometimes you're just going to share an article and you want to say thoughts, that's fine. But in my opinion, do 2 to 3 sentences to draw out what's most important, what struck you about it. I am very much into the leave a comment, call to action. That is scary. I know that, right? You're just what if nobody comments, right? I totally get that. But what I would say is that's what you have your accountability buddies for in here, or you have me. Send it to me, right? Send it to somebody where it's hey, I just wrote this, would you mind leaving a comment, right? You're not telling them what to say. It's take a look at what I shared. And if you don't mind, I'd love it if you leave a comment, because you know that it's just about that, breaking the ice, right? And then it starts to pick up on its own. So I would say, I wanted to answer that question because I saw it in the chat, and it's something that I get a lot around how much content people should add in a share.
Yeah. And so, any final questions? We're going to do a breakout soon, cool. And then hopefully you'll get Callie in the room with you. But what you're going to do first, Callie, that was so amazingly helpful. I think I learned more about LinkedIn in this one call than I have this since I've been on LinkedIn. So we're going to do breakout rooms, and because I want us to kind of follow up on what Callie just said about that fear of no one liking your message or your comments. What you guys are actually going to do, I'm actually going to give you an assignment. We're going to do a breakout group. Introduce yourself, your name, your company, the title, give a brief introduction on how you've been using LinkedIn. And you're going to actually commit 1, 2, or 3 things that you're going to do in the next 24 hours. So for example, right after this call, you're going to add at least 3 people you've met on this call. You're gonna post one thing tomorrow, an observation, a thought, a comment, whatnot. And you're gonna tag me. And I don't know if Callie is okay with you tagging her, but tag me, because you'll at least have one person that's gonna like it. Whoever else you know is in your breakout group, you want to get their information as well. And then you guys are going to be like accountability for each other. You could also maybe update your profile. And or another thing you could do is connect with 5 thought leaders who you really admire, who provide good content. And you want to maybe mix in folks who are in your industry as well. So if you're in marketing, you might want to follow a CMO that's pretty interesting, like Vaynerchuk or whatnot. Or if you're in law, someone who's kind of really doing well in that kind of endeavor. So I'm going to break you guys